It is a disgraceful moment.
Yield? Will the gentleman yield?
No.
I will say to my friend...
No.
Well, I'll yield,
Mr.
Speaker. Madam Speaker.
Dreyer.
Madam Speaker, may I yield time to my friend? Madam Speaker, may I yield time to my friend from Michigan? Am I allowed to yield time to my friend from Michigan?
Mr. Dreyer, you have already spoken, and what you're doing here is to
I'm the author of this measure.
I ask for an additional 15 seconds.
The gentleman has not been recognized.
You to yield me? I want you to yield to me.
I yield the gentleman 15 seconds.
Look, Mr. Dreyer, it's very clear what you're doing here. Mr. Reid wants to sit down and work with Mr. McConnell. What you're trying to do is to make sure that a signal is sent to the Senate. Don't bother.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes.
I thank my friend for yielding. And let me say that the action that we're about to take here today is going to help with the process of seeing Senator McConnell and Senator Reid work together. Why? Because of the
I'm
fact
going to take
that
back my time. Mr. Dreyer, that is pernicious nonsense.
Madam Speaker.
Members are reminded to address their comments to the chair, not otherwise. Gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, I didn't hear you, Madam Speaker.
I said members are reminded to address their comments to the chair, not to others.
I will not only address you, Madam Chair, but I won't point my finger at you as I address you. Let me say, Madam Speaker, that Senator McConnell has just minutes ago asked Senator Reid to bring the Reid proposal to the floor of the United States Senate. And a decision has been made by Senator Reid not to bring the measure up. On at least 2 occasions, Senator McConnell has asked, since Senator Reid has said that his proposal is the only one that can pass both houses of Congress, Senator McConnell has asked us to show what we all know, and that is there is not going to be a majority of support in the House of Representatives for his proposal. And then, when that happens, we look forward to the discussions that will take place with Speaker Boehner, Senator Reid, Leader McConnell, Leader Pelosi. And with that, Madam Speaker, I'd like to yield 30 seconds to a hardworking new member of Congress from Indiana, Mr. Young.
The gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We need to cut spending now. We need to control spending in the future. But the American people understand that our foremost constitutional duty here in Congress is to make sure that America is safe. Former Secretary Gates said that further cuts to our military will mean that there are certain things our military won't be able to do and places they won't be able to go. This proposal, the Reid-Obama plan, proposes cutting defense spending by $859 billion over 10 years compared to the President's fiscal year 11 budget. Yet the President and Senator Reid have not told us what places we won't be going, what missions we won't be doing.
Expired.
This is irresponsible. I can't support this proposal.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I would like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, a member of the Committee on Ways and Means, Mr. Doggett.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
This Republican ploy is too clever by half. At the very same time, Republican senators are filibustering against bringing up this proposal in the Senate. The House Republicans are insisting on bringing it up here so they can vote it down. While it is imperfect and imbalanced, this Reid proposal protects educational opportunities for college students, it protects retirement security through Medicare and Social Security, and it provides more important resources for public services than the reactionary House Republican budget. With House Republicans still at fault for refusing to seek any type of middle ground, the Reid bill is the least worst alternative to avoid default. As desperate as they were last night to cobble together a handful of votes to pass a partisan Boehner bill, they are even more desperate to defeat this reasonable middle ground because they insist it must have 2/3 of the votes of this body. Let us join Democrats in unity to approve
Gentleman's
this proposal.
time has expired. The gentleman from
Madam Speaker, I yield myself 10 seconds to remind my friend from Texas that the measure that we voted on last night stemmed from the bipartisan agreement that was put together 1 week ago this afternoon right down the hall. And with that, I'm happy to yield 1 minute to my good friend from Jefferson, Louisiana, Mr. Scalise.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. If you look at the Reid bill, it doesn't even start to address the problem. With all of its budget gimmicks and shell games, I think most people recognize if you had an honest conversation, you'd know it doesn't even start to tackle the spending problem. Now, hardworking American families back home know the problem in America is not that we've got corporate jet owners and millionaires and billionaires. The problem is that Washington spends too much money. You don't solve that problem by sending more money up to Washington to spend even more. And so when the President talks about a balanced approach, what he really means is more job-killing tax hikes. Families back home know what we really need is a balanced budget amendment to put accountability back in place in Washington, to control this rampant, out-of-control spending in Washington, and to finally attack the real problem, and that's Washington spending. I oppose the bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute. Without objection.
Madam Speaker, this agreement offers the calm, reasonable compromise the country wants. Most Americans don't want to let the debt ceiling expire. This bill solves that problem. Most Americans say, you know what, you probably could cut about 5% in most government programs. Not everybody believes that, but that's what this bill does. Most Americans say that there ought to be some other way to look at difficult entitlement programs and other issues, that the bill sets up a process to do that. What the bill does is recognize the difference between the two parties and puts that difference aside. The majority party wants to make radical changes in Medicare and Social Security. We do not. We believe that the wealthiest Americans should pay their fair share to solve this problem. The majority party does not. The bill leaves that disagreement aside, focuses on the areas of agreement. You know, American troops on patrol are not asking under what conditions they should do their duty this afternoon. They're understanding their duty, and they're doing it, and so should we. Pass this bill.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, at this time I'm happy to yield 30 seconds to my good friend from Colorado, a hardworking new member, the class of 87 people who came in here to change this place, Mr. Tipton.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Dreyer. When we hear our colleague from Texas say this is the least worst alternative, and that's our best choice, I think the American people demand and deserve better. It is time that we put people before politics and partisanship aside so that we can have progress for the American people.
What purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise?
Madam Speaker, I yield to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson-Lee, for unanimous consent request.
As an American, I stand here to vote
for what time?
I yield for unanimous consent.
The gentlelady is recognized for unanimous consent.
As an American, I stand here united with America voting yes on this bill to save Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. As an American, I ask unanimous consent to put my statement into the record.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Georgia, a member of the Financial Services Committee, Mr. Scott.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Representatives, this is not a nation of Tea Party people. It is not a nation of Democrats or Republicans. It is a nation of all of us. And what the Reid plan presents, it represents the Tea Party, the Republicans, and the Democrats, and the President of the United States. This is what the American people expect us to do. That is what has made this country great. At critical times, we've come together and we have compromised. We're protecting Medicare. We're protecting Social Security. We're protecting Medicaid as the people of this country want. And yet, as the Republicans and the Tea Party want, there are no tax increases in this. And as the President of the United States has asked us, there will be a second ask in the year 2013. Ladies and gentlemen of this House, the time is present. It is time for us to do the American thing. Stand up for the American people and let us compromise in the best interest of all of us so this nation will not go into default.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Madam Speaker, I yield myself 15 seconds.
Gentleman is
The
recognized.
House is not in order, Madam Speaker. Well, it is now. Madam Speaker, I think it's very important to note that yesterday and today we are continuing to hear that under the Boehner proposal that cuts in Medicare and Social Security would take place, when in fact both the Boehner and Reid proposals have virtually identical plans to put into place a joint select committee that would in fact report back to this institution. And thank you very much for helping to attain order, friends. And Madam Speaker, with that, I'm happy to yield 1 minute to my very good friend from Houston, a member of the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Culberson.
Gentleman is recognized from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think it's important for everyone to know that the reason the House is considering this bill today is to put up another guardrail to show what the House cannot do. It's important in any compromise to understand what can and cannot be done. The House will not pass. This new constitutional conservative majority in the House will not pass the Reid bill because of its devastating cuts to our U.S. military. The House is going to find a way to compromise with the Senate, but it is not going to include massive cuts in the military. It's, as we've established, not going to include tax increases. It looks like it's going to include some sort of a select committee that's going to make recommendations to the Congress. We're going to find a way to make sure that America does not hit the brick wall of running out of the ability to borrow. But this is one of the most important debates, one of the most important votes we'll have in our brief time here in Congress, is to make sure that we're protecting our kids and grandchildren from a crushing, unaffordable level of debt. So we're working hard to find what the limits are of what the House and the Senate will do. So we've got to have this vote today to show what the House will not do, and we're not going to cut the military as the Reid bill would.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself 15 seconds.
Gentleman recognized
Madam
for 15
Speaker,
seconds.
make no mistake about it. From day one, this Republican majority has put Medicare on the chopping block, and the Boehner proposal would decimate Medicare as we know it, and Medicaid and Social Security. At this point, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Ms. Wasserman Schultz.
Gentlelady from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would point out that to my good friend from Texas, Madam Speaker, as a constitutional conservative, he should recognize that the Constitution itself was a series of compromises. And our nation and our economy is being pushed closer and closer to default. Hardliners on the right, extremists by any other name, have refused to compromise. We are putting in jeopardy the payment of Social Security obligations, paying the members of our military. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff yesterday couldn't even answer in the affirmative that he was confident that those payments could be made if we default. We're putting in jeopardy the full faith and credit of our nation. Yesterday, seniors in my district called my office in tears, wondering whether we would default and what those consequences would mean for them. These are real people who live on Social Security to survive. We have many strongly held views on both sides of the aisle. I don't like everything in the Reid proposal before us, but compromise is critical. I recognize that I can't have everything 100% my way. Democrats have been at the compromise table for months. With an empty chair on the other side of the aisle, it is time, on the other side of the table, it is time for Republicans to warm that seat across from us. Mr. Dreyer claims that Republicans have brought the Reid proposal to the floor to show that it doesn't represent a bill that can pass the House. Yet the process is a sham. The bill has been brought up under a rule that requires a two-thirds vote of this House for passage, which they know cannot happen. What are Republicans afraid of? They're afraid that a fair process might show just how much support there is for this proposal. Where are the cooler heads in the Republican caucus? Where are they? They appear not to exist. Your caucus seems to be held hostage by extremists and have driven the moderates from the room and from the discussion. Allowing extremists to take over is doing harm to our country. President Obama, House and Senate Democrats have said we are willing to support cuts, even to programs that we would not. Can I have another 30 seconds, please?
I can yield the gentleman another 15 seconds.
Thank you very much. President Obama, House and Senate Democrats have said we are willing to support cuts, even to programs we would normally fight to preserve. Republicans, in response, have doubled down in a Groundhog Day move that have pushed dead-on-arrival proposals that jeopardize our economy by bringing us closer to the brink of chaos. At the end of the day, the stewardship of our economy is our responsibility. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Madam Speaker, with that, I'm happy to yield 1 minute to our good friend, a hardworking new member of this institution, the gentlewoman from Camas, Washington.
The gentlelady from Washington is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll make this really quick. You know, this is the reason we came here. This caucus is here, the new freshmen are here. It's because the American people said enough. They said, you're spending too much of our money, and that's what this conversation is about today. The president stood on the floor across the aisle, or across the rotunda, a couple years ago and said, it's a failure of leadership to raise the debt ceiling. Well, guess what? I came here never expecting to raise the debt ceiling, but I've now compromised. I've twice voted to raise the debt ceiling to cover spending from failed stimulus, from a health care bill that ends Medicare as we know it. I voted twice for solutions. And you know what? That's compromise for me. When I ran for this seat, I told the people that I serve, you know what? I'm not extreme. I am mad. I'm mad that Washington, D.C. thinks you are their piggy bank. That's what this debate is about. We end it today. I yield back.
Time has expired.
I yield myself 10 seconds, Madam Speaker. I yield myself 10 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 seconds.
Just to remind the gentlelady that she has voted time and time and time again to decimate Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And we're not going to stand by and let them do that. At this point, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, the ranking member of the Budget Committee.
The House will be in order. The gentleman will suspend. The House will be in order.
At this point, Madam Speaker, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, the distinguished ranking member of the Budget Committee, Mr. Van Hollen.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think the American people just heard a new definition of compromise. Paying your bills is a compromise. The American family can't wake up one morning and say, boy, it's a compromise to pay for what I've already incurred. It's a compromise to pay my mortgage. That's a new one for the American people, and it's part of a reckless pattern that we've seen emerging here. First, our Republican colleagues walked out of the Biden talks. Then twice they walked out of talks with the President of the United States. Then when the Republican leader in the Senate put forward a proposal, they ridiculed it. Then Thursday night in this very House, they said no to the proposal by the Republican Speaker of this House until he amended it. The same Speaker who said we need to have an adult moment. Here's the concluding paragraph of today's Wall Street Journal. Republicans are not looking like adults to whom we can entrust the government. The American people are looking for that adult moment. If you're not willing to compromise on critical things for the country, you are not fit to govern. And that is why Senator Reid put forward a compromise proposal. He doesn't like his own proposal. He'd be the first to tell you that. But you know what it did? It met the criteria our Republican colleagues put forward. $2.4 trillion in cuts. Even if you take out the war savings, more guaranteed cuts, according to CBO, than the Boehner proposal the other night. It also incorporates McConnell's proposal. Here's what it doesn't do. It doesn't end the Medicare guarantee. It doesn't cut Social Security, and it doesn't protect tax breaks for special interest corporations. Now look, what we're seeing here is people who are holding the American economy hostage. You have to stop playing kamikaze pilot with the future of the American people in order to extract 100% of demands for budgets your way. Compromise is necessary. And that is what Senator Reid put forward, a compromise proposal. Let's show we can govern together.
Gentleman's time has expired.
I yield myself 5 seconds.
From California
I yield myself 5 seconds to again say to my colleagues that the measure we voted on last night stemmed from a bipartisan compromise that was put together in this very Capitol 1 week ago today. And with that, Madam Speaker, I'm happy to yield 30 seconds, 1 minute, actually 1 minute, to my good friend from Urbana, Ohio, Mr. Jordan.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Let's just cut to the numbers and what this bill does. So we got a $14 trillion debt. This is going to raise the debt ceiling $2.4 trillion. It's going to achieve savings of $18 billion in the first year. So just think of it the way American people would see things. You got a kid who's maxed out the credit card at $14,000. The kid goes to the bank and the bank says, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you we're going to give you $2,400 more on the credit card, but you have to promise us over the next year you're going to spend $18 less than you planned on spending. That's what this bill does. This bill doesn't even come close to starting to solve the problem. That's why we're against it, and that's why it should be defeated.
The gentleman yields back. House will be in order. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself 5 seconds.
Gentleman's recognized.
My colleague from California keeps on saying that the Boehner bill was bipartisan. I'll remind him that not one single Democrat voted for that bill because Democrats do not want to decimate Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And at this time, I'd like to yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fattah.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 30 seconds.
Well, I assume that some think that the American people are gullible. But this is not a coincidence or happenstance. We got a Republican majority that took us from trillions in surplus to trillions in deficit, added a $7 trillion prescription drug plan, unfunded wars, and then refused any additional revenue. And choking off our country's ability to pay its debt, now they want to walk us towards default. There's a special place in the shadows of the history books for a group of people who, in order to gain power, were willing to sacrifice America's leadership in this world. Thank you.
The gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to yield to any of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who will tell me where in the Boehner bill it says that we want to cut Medicare, Social Security, or any of the other items that they continue to attack. I'd happy to yield to anyone who can point to me where in the Boehner bill it says that, and I'm happy to yield to anyone. Obviously, I'm happy to yield to my friend.
Yeah, in the balanced budget amendment that you have, and in the Ryan proposal, you have all of it goes after Medicare and Social Security, and we're going to fight you on that, Mr. Dreyer.
The House will be in
order. Madam Speaker, with that, I'm happy to yield 30 seconds to my good friend from Aurora, Colorado.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 30 seconds.
I've already asked.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the President of the United States, Barack Obama, has said to the Congress that we need to put America first and get this debt limit done. And I agree with that. I agree that we need to put America first and put politics aside. Last weekend, a bipartisan proposal emerged with Speaker Boehner and Majority Leader Reid, Senator Reid, coming to an agreement. But the President of the United States got a hold of Senator Reid and said, absolutely not.
Fired.
I yield my friend an additional 15 seconds, Madam Speaker.
15 seconds. The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The reason why he pulled the agreement was because it didn't have enough money to get him through the election of 2012, November of 2012. The President's campaign considerations is not putting America first. We need to put America first.
Gentleman's time has expired.
And vote down the proposal.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
If the chairman of the Rules Committee wanted to yield for an answer to his question, I'd be happy to give him an answer.
Gentleman is not recognized.
Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, may I just explain? We have a lot of members who'd like to be heard. I asked if I expended time by asking if anyone wanted to respond.
The gentleman will suspend. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
May I inquire the time remaining on both sides?
The gentleman from Massachusetts has 4 minutes remaining. The gentleman from California has 6 1/4 minutes remaining.
We'll reserve our time. Maybe the gentleman from California might want to yield to Mr. Van Hollen, but we'll reserve our time at this point.
The gentleman from California.
Well, Madam Speaker, I did ask a few minutes ago and expended time by asking anyone to yield. We have a lot of members here who want to be heard from. And Mr. McGovern has time if he'd like to yield. I'll yield 15 seconds to my friend, and maybe Mr. McGovern will yield him 15 seconds, and then we can hear what Mr. Van Hollen has to hear. So I yield the gentleman 15 seconds, Madam Speaker.
I thank the chairman. If you look at the Boehner proposal, it says we got to cut $1.8 trillion. The Speaker of the House has already said that you can't have any revenue as part of that. You can't close one corporate loophole. In fact, he said that the majority would override any proposal. So the only other way to get it mathematically is to start slashing Medicare and to start going after Social Security.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Madam Speaker, my point has been made very eloquently by the gentleman, and I very much appreciate it. You want to? Pat's on that.
Who seeks recognition?
I thank my friend for his contribution. Madam Speaker, at this point, I'm happy to yield 1 minute to my good friend from Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania, Mr. Meehan.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we used to say in the courtroom, the facts are there are no facts. The truth of the matter is the only people who are cutting $500 billion from Medicare are the Democrats in their proposal. But that's not my
gentleman
point.
yield?
But that's not, no, the gentleman will not yield. Let me make my point, and I'll be happy to be off. The issue here is really one of compromise. And I come here as a freshman, somebody that's looking at this for the first time. And we came in and worked on a bill, the Boehner proposal. The frustration for me was knowing going in that evening that I had already been made aware that this leadership, the leadership of the party on the other side, had whipped their members. So not a single member was ready on the other side to sit and talk to anyone on this aisle. The whip was there. You will not vote. You will not talk. We were not able. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Those in the back of the chamber will take their conversations off the floor.
Madam Speaker?
The gentleman from Massachusetts.
I yield 10 seconds to the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Van Hollen.
Recognized for 10 seconds.
Just to be very clear, what we did was eliminated the overpayments to some of the Medicare Advantage plans, and hey, listen, hey, Madam Speaker,
the House is not in order.
Madam Speaker,
just the gentleman will suspend. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And we used much of those savings to close the prescription drug donut hole. In your budget, you took the whole $500 billion, but you reopened the prescription drug donut hole at the same time you were eliminating the Medicare guarantee. That's the difference.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, let me yield myself 5 seconds to say that I thank the gentleman for once again pointing to the fact that there is nothing in the Boehner proposal that does anything to cut Social Security or Medicare. And, Madam Speaker, with that, I'm happy to yield 15 seconds to a new member from Zeeland, Michigan, Mr. Huizenga.
Gentleman's recognized for 15 seconds.
I appreciate my colleague from California doing that. Earlier we heard from a colleague from Florida on the other side of the aisle who was talking about the Constitution and about the intent of it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is about controlling our spending and accountability with the American people. And it might not be in this bill, and it might not be in other bills, but eventually we have to realize we need to put institutional brakes on our spending because we cannot control our spending in this institution.
The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Yeah, this is about protecting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from South Carolina, our Assistant Leader, Mr. Clyburn.
The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. The clock is ticking. The American people are anxiously waiting for responsible leadership, and the Republicans here in Congress are continuing to play political games. Last night, the United States Senate rightly defeated the Boehner bill on a bipartisan vote. That partisan bill was the product of the Republicans' my way or the highway approach that held all Americans hostage to exact a ransom payment from Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security beneficiaries. Now, we must find a common-sense compromise. That's why I will vote for the Reid amendment today, the Reid bill today. The Reid bill saves America's economy from the devastation that will result from defaulting on our fiduciary obligations. Throughout the deliberations on the self-inflicted debt crisis, my bottom line has been to protect Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. This plan contains real spending cuts and deficit reduction to begin putting our nation's fiscal house in order. It meets the Speaker's requirement that spending be cut by an amount at least as large as the debt ceiling increase. And it does so while protecting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid beneficiaries. It also safeguards Pell Grants that provide low-income young people the opportunity to go to college and to work to achieve the American dream. We must take responsible action now to avert this crisis and move to significant measures to create jobs and generate economic growth. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'll yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, this time I'm happy to yield 30 seconds. The gentleman from Tupelo, Mississippi, Mr. Nunnally.
Thank you, Mr. Dreyer.
The gentleman from Mississippi is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We've heard from the friends on the other side. We want compromise. The American people expect solutions. And this Harry Reid plan offers no real solutions to the out-of-control spending problem. This Harry Reid plan offers no solutions to the broken Washington mess that got us here, so I'll vote no.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, may I inquire about the time on both sides, please?
The gentleman from Massachusetts has 1 3/4 minutes remaining. The gentleman from California has 4 1/2 minutes.
We'll reserve our time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, at this time I'm happy to yield a minute to my good friend from Wantage, New Jersey, Mr. Garrett.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute.
For a minute? Oh, okay.
1 minute.
And as I come to the floor, as the previous speaker has said, this side of the aisle is committed to reaching a solution and not just a deal to this problem. We are committed to reaching out across the aisle and across the other side of this House to reach a compromise. We have already compromised on the level of cuts going even further. We have already compromised on the level of the caps, raising the caps to make it even easier in that regard as well. We have also already compromised from where we started with regard to a balanced budget amendment, holding true to the idea that we should, as all Americans also agree, eventually pass a change to the Constitution and require a balanced budget amendment to this bill. But at the end of the day, although we will compromise on cuts and we will compromise on caps and we will compromise on moving forward on a balanced budget amendment, let it be clear, as God is my witness, we will not compromise on our principles of defending the Constitution and defending the Americans and making sure that our posterity does not have this excessive debt on it. I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Engel.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 30 seconds.
Well, thank you. Here we are on the brink of economic disaster, and we're wasting time with symbolic political theater at its worst. We want compromise and solutions and to protect Medicare on the Democratic side. Why don't you try working with Democrats? The American people want us to meet in the middle. They don't want this nonsense. The debate now focuses only on spending cuts. without closing tax loopholes, and that still isn't enough for some. No wonder the Wall Street Journal said the Republicans don't look like adults to whom voters can entrust the government. The Democrats want to compromise in the middle, and if the President needs to pull the 14th Amendment, I think he should do that because the Republicans have shown they don't want compromise at all.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. At this time, I'm happy to yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Newburgh, Indiana, Mr. Bouchon.
The gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, here we are on the verge of a financial meltdown, and my friends on the other side of the aisle are worried about politics. They're here today worried about protecting the President from having to do his job, lead. The Republicans in the House are leading. We've passed 2 bills that would end this crisis, and the Senate haven't put them down. They haven't voted on them. They've tabled them. We're here to lead. We need leadership, and we're providing it. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, our side is prepared to close, so I will ask, we'll reserve our time.
Madam Speaker, we have several more speakers on our side.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
At this time, I'm happy to yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Ashton, Wisconsin.
Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The American people are sick of these kind of conversations. My friends across the aisle voted to rob $500 billion out of Medicare for Obamacare. They instituted the iPad board that's going to ration care for our seniors. We brought a proposal to this House that was going to root out all loopholes and nooks and crannies where businesses hide their money, and they all voted no.
Gentleman yield.
The American people are looking for real solutions. And you know what? This Harry Reid bill is full of budget
gimmicks time has expired.
I'm sorry.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Budget gimmicks that don't get the job done. I yield back.
Who claims time? The House will be in order. Gentleman from California.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. At this time, I'm happy to yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Biloxi, Mississippi, Mr. Palazzo.
Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The American people entrusted each member of Congress with extraordinary power. That's the power to cast votes as their votes in Congress and provide solutions to America's problems. Most of all, they expect us to lead during times of crisis. House Republicans have led. House Republicans have provided plans and solutions to America's debt crisis. House Republicans have used their voice as representatives of their district to end the debt limit crisis and begin balancing the budget. We've done our job. It's time the Senate does theirs. Leader Reid and President Obama are all that stands between the American people and a responsible resolution to this debt crisis. I say to our colleagues in the Senate, we were sent here not to punt on the difficult decisions. Vote no on the Reid plan. Thank you.
The gentleman reserved.
I just want to ask a unanimous consent to insert in the record an article that appeared in the Wall Street Journal on today entitled "The Debt Limit Hobbits."
Without objection. Gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, the gentleman's prepared to close? I'm sorry?
Yes. Our leader is prepared to close for us. I will.
Okay, then, gentlemen,
take 15 seconds and introduce our leader.
I'll close on our side. We'll reserve the balance of time.
Gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
All right. Madam Speaker, I yield myself 15 seconds before I yield the remaining minute to the...
Gentleman is recognized for 15 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I implore rational Republicans to join Democrats in passing the Reid bill. And I appeal to your sense of responsibility, to your sense of duty, to your country. Have the courage of your convictions to do what's right. Don't be paralyzed by the threats and intimidating tactics of the Tea Party or other extreme groups. Stand with us to protect Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And I yield the balance of our time, the 1 minute, to the gentlewoman from California, the Democratic leader and a defender of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, Nancy Pelosi.
The gentlelady from California is recognized for the time remaining.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding, applaud him for his superb leadership of this bill today, recognize the great leadership of Mr. Van Hollen as our ranking member on the Budget Committee, and he and Mr. Clyburn representing the values of the American people at the negotiating table for this. I rise in support of the Reid legislation, urge my colleagues to support it because it protects Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, because it is fair. But I want to use my time in the following way. I listened very carefully and very attentively to our speaker yesterday when he spoke. And he used the term, the bill is not perfect, but we did our level best. Our level best. One might infer from that that this process is on the level. How can it be on the level if we're bringing a $2.5 trillion bill to the floor under suspension the same way we might bring the naming of a post office? $2.5 trillion, 20 minutes on each side. Members have said on both sides of the aisle this is a very important debate. Well, if it is, why is it brought under suspension, which requires a two-thirds vote, guaranteeing that it will not prevail? Not on the level. The word level, of course, enters into, is this a level playing field? Is it on the level for America's seniors to pay more for Medicare for fewer benefits while we give tax subsidies to big oil? Is it on the level for us to throw people out of nursing homes by reducing Medicaid so we can give tax breaks to corporations sending jobs overseas? Is it on the level for us to make young people and their families pay more for their college education so that we can give tax breaks to the high end? Is it on the level to bring a Boehner bill to the floor that makes all those cuts, undermines Social Security, eliminates Medicare, and doesn't charge 1 red cent to people who have benefited so much from the greatness of our country? Is it our best? It is our best to drag this out for all this time, to keep in suspense as to whether we would honor our constitutional responsibility to pay our debts. The Constitution says the national debt has to be recognized. It has to be recognized. And recognized we did, president after president, 32 times in recent memory, including when President Bush was president. At that time, even though many of us did not agree with the war in Iraq, did not agree with tax cuts for the wealthiest people in our country to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, did not agree the giveaway to the pharmaceutical industry. We didn't agree with that policy. That's how we got into debt, turning around from the surplus direction we were going in with President Clinton, whose last 4 budgets were in balance or in surplus. We didn't agree how President Bush took us into debt, but we never stood in the way of honoring the full faith and credit of the United States. Why then? Why then? Why then would we this one time with this president decide that we would put up barriers so extreme like changing the Constitution in order to lift the debt limit? That's a mathematical requirement. Of course we must all reduce the deficit. But is it our best to say we're going to use the debate to reduce the deficit to destroy the public space? Look at the appropriations bills they're bringing before us. Destroying the public space of clean air, clean water, food safety, the education of our children, the health, the financial security of our seniors through Medicare and Medicaid. That's what they are doing. If we are just reducing the deficit here, we have come to those conclusions. We have to do it. We know how to do it. But if they want to take it to the next step of destroying the public sector We cannot go to that place when it affects the air our children breathe, the water they drink, the food they eat, the education they receive, the safety of the neighborhoods in which they live. The Speaker also said that the bill was not perfect. Well, no bill is perfect. But I think that I disagree in one respect. I think this bill is perfect in its absurdity. It is perfect. His bill was perfectly absurd. Perfectly absurd. It's perfectly absurd, again, to say, oh, President, after 32 times lifting the debt ceiling, we're going to change the game for you, Mr. President. It's perfectly absurd for them to say that the bill they brought to the floor yesterday, the Boehner bill that they brought to the floor, was an agreement of the four leaders of the House and Senate, Democratic and Republican. Either you don't know what you're talking about, or it's a perfect absurdity, and I will not yield to you. It is very, very important that we all take a deep breath. We have important work to do, an important decision to make. Senator Reid has given us a direction to go. No cuts in benefits for Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security beneficiaries. I wish that we had revenues in there so that those who had benefited from the greatness the last 50 years of bipartisan progress for the American people would be able to make their contribution, but not one red cent of revenue while we're saying kids should pay more for their student loans. So it's time to end this theater of the absurd. It's time for us to get real. It's time for us to get real and listen to the wisdom of the American people. They have said to us that they support an overwhelming numbers, a bipartisan, balanced approach. In overwhelming numbers that we should all pay our fair share. And they all agree that we should get this over with so we can get back to work, putting the American people back to work by creating jobs. The Speaker chose, when he didn't have the votes, instead of to reach out in a bipartisan way to see how we could work together, he chose to go to the dark side. Let me repeat, and I repeat, he chose to go to the dark side by putting forth a bill that he himself told his members would sink it in the Senate and I add, lead to default. Lead to default. We cannot default. We're the greatest country that ever existed in the history of the world. We're the United States of America. So let's go from the dark side to the bright side of the American people. Vote yes on the Reid bill. Thank you, my colleagues.
The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Members will take their seats. Members in the back of the chamber will remove their conversations. Gentleman from California is recognized.
I yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentleman is recognized for the balance
Madam
of the time.
Speaker, I believe in civil discourse, and I want to say that on several occasions in the past 45 minutes, members of my staff have urged me to have the words taken down that have been offered offered by members on the other side of the aisle. And I chose not to, Madam Speaker.
The House is not in order. The House is not in order. Gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, in the name of civility, I chose not to because we have a very serious issue that needs to be addressed. And it's before us, and we need to make sure that in the next several hours we effectively address it. Now, since 1962, on 75 different occasions, we have seen the United States Congress increase the debt ceiling. Now, we keep hearing about the urgency that exists today. Well, I'll tell you what's urgent. If we don't change the course that we've been on the last 4 years with an 82% increase in non-defense discretionary spending, we are not going to have resources for any of the things that my colleagues have talked about. What we need to do, and the message that has been set, is that for the first time ever, we are going to change business as usual. Now, I'm going to say something that I probably shouldn't at the very end here. There are some good things in Senator Reid's proposal. There are some good things in Senator Reid's proposal. I believe that the idea of establishing a joint select committee of our colleagues who will come together and make recommendations and force an up or down vote in both houses of Congress is a positive thing. But I will say this, I don't believe that continuing down the road towards increasing debt ceiling with the kinds of checks that are necessary is the right thing for us to do. Last night's agreement that we voted on here was, in fact, it stemmed from the bipartisan talks that took place right down this hall. And I will say to my colleagues, Madam Speaker, vote no on the Reid proposal.
Gentleman yields. All time having expired, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2693 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no.
Madam
In the opinion of the chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative. For what purposes, gentlemen, rise?
I ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, this 15-minute vote on suspending the rules and passing H.R. 2693 will be followed by a 5-minute vote on suspending the rules and passing H.R. 2062 if ordered. This is a 15-minute vote.
A rare return for the U.S. House on a Saturday, but they've come in for one purpose, and that is to vote on H.R. 2693. This is essentially Senator Harry Reid's debt ceiling and deficit reduction plan. The measure would provide for $2.2 trillion in debt reduction over 10 years, and it would allow the debt ceiling to raise to by $2.4 trillion through fiscal year 2012. This follows yesterday's passage of John Boehner's plan here in the U.S. House by a vote of 218 to 210. That measure failed to move forward in the Senate. It was blocked there by a vote of 59 to 41. So here, a vote on the Harry Reid measure as introduced in the House. This is a 15-minute vote. One more will follow this, and that will be it in terms of votes this afternoon in the House. The schedule ahead for the weekend still to be determined.
On this vote, the yeas are 172,